Welcome, dear listener. As you gently begin to settle in for the night, I invite you to leave the noise of the present behind. Let your body sink into stillness, your breath slow to a calm rhythm, and your thoughts begin to wander. You're safe here. You're at peace. And tonight, we're traveling far from fluorescent lights and buzzing screens, back to a time when the night was sacred, darkness was complete, and sleep wasn't stolen by alarms, but invited like a guest. Before we begin our quiet journey into Roman life, let me ask, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Leave a comment and let me know. I love seeing the little constellation of listeners spread across the globe, each of us connected through this shared moment of rest. And if you enjoy these gentle, history-laced meanderings, consider subscribing. That way you'll always have a story waiting for you whenever the day gets too loud. Now, close your eyes and imagine the soft creak of a wooden shutter, the cooling hush of twilight, the scent of olive oil lamps flickering in cozy corners. Picture yourself in a world where sleep wasn't just rest. It was ritual, the world of ancient Rome, where people, surprisingly, might have slept better than we do today. And tonight, that's exactly where we're headed. Through marble villas and rustic farmhouses, under starry skies and woven blankets, let's explore how Romans found their way to deep, luxurious slumber. Let's begin with the silence. True, complete, velvety silence. In a Roman domus, a house in the city, you might fall asleep to the gentle splash of a courtyard fountain, or the rustle of fig trees in a private peristyle garden. Walls were thick, built of stone or brick, insulated from the street by layers of design and wealth. A family's bedrooms, called cubicula, were often placed around the atrium, enclosed, dark and cool. Some had no windows at all, only the gentle glow of a lantern or a fading ember from the hearth. In those rooms, the absence of artificial light created a darkness so pure, your eyes had no choice but to rest. In wealthier homes, a servant would extinguish lamps as you drifted off, or pull woolen curtains over the doorway. The beds themselves, though simpler than what we might imagine, were elevated wooden frames strung with rope or leather, topped with cushions filled with straw or feathers. Linen sheets, if you were rich. Wool, if you weren't. In colder months, furs and heavy woven blankets were layered thickly. But it wasn't just about comfort. It was about preparation. Romans respected sleep. They treated it like a necessary pause in life's theater, not a weakness to be overcome. But the best Roman sleep didn't always happen at night. That's one of their secrets. In a world without constant illumination, people often followed what we might now call a biphasic sleep pattern. A first sleep after sundown, followed by a gentle waking around midnight, maybe to pray, to think, even to visit with a neighbor. And then a second sleep that stretched toward dawn. In the countryside, farmers rose with the sun and took long naps during the heat of the day, curling up in shaded porches or beneath olive trees. Sleep was not just a nightly obligation, it was woven through the rhythm of their lives. Even the streets helped. In cities like Rome, night watchmen would patrol to keep noise and danger at bay. Merchants and laborers followed strict curfews. The city itself seemed to sleep, unlike our modern world which hums and blinks endlessly. There were no car horns, no buzzing electronics, no sirens to rupture the peace. If a dog barked, it was notable. If someone passed by on foot, it was a rarity. Most of the city was wrapped in hush, like a secret being kept by the stones. And of course, we cannot talk about Roman sleep without speaking of their obsession with baths. Public baths, private baths, warm baths, cold baths. For many Romans, the day ended not with doom scrolling or Netflix, but with immersion. Warm water soothed tired muscles. Fragrant oils rubbed into the skin, signaled the body to slow, lying on a heated marble bench, pores opening, eyelids growing heavy. It was the beginning of sleep long before the bed. Even the poorest citizens scraped together coins for a quick soak before bed, emerging cleaner, calmer, ready to drift. So as you lie there now, listening to these echoes of the past, imagine yourself on a simple Roman mattress beneath the arch of a tiled ceiling. The faint scent of lavender oil lingers from your bath. Your room is dark, cool, and silent. The world outside is still. No notifications, no stress, just breath, just sleep, just the weight of a day well lived, easing off your shoulders as your body surrenders to the night. Now that you're there, in your quiet little corner of ancient Rome, let's go deeper, deeper into the rituals, the rhythms, the little habits that made Roman sleep not just restful but rich. You've just finished your bath. The warm marble soothed your bones, and your skin carries the subtle sheen of olive oil infused with herbs. Your feet are bare. The stone floor is cool beneath them. The stars have begun their slow arc overhead, and everything about the night invites you to close your eyes. But before you do, you light a single clay lamp. Its flame flickers gently against the walls of your cubicle. You sit on the edge of your bed, made of sturdy wood, maybe even ivory trimmed if you're lucky. The mattress is stuffed with straw, but not just any straw. Dried and cleaned to be soft, padded with feathers or wool, if your household has means. Your blanket is woven tightly, smelling faintly of the sun it dried under earlier today. You lie back, not just to rest, but to think. Romans were fond of this quiet moment, called otium, a kind of peaceful reflection before slumber. No duties, no politics, just breath and thought. Sleep was sacred in Roman thought, not just a function of the body, but something closer to divine. Dreams were messages, signs from the gods, glimpses into what may come or what had been overlooked. Many Roman homes kept small altars, even in the bedroom, where a quiet offering of incense or bread might be left before bed. Some people slept facing east, toward the rising sun, while others wrapped themselves in symbolism, amulets, protective symbols drawn on walls or laurel leaves placed beneath the bed for protection. You hear a soft sound outside, perhaps the coo of a night bird or the rustle of a breeze against the fig tree beyond the courtyard wall. But it doesn't jolt you. Rome at night was remarkably safe, at least for those who belonged within its walls. There were curfews, street lamps, yes, ancient versions of oil-lit posts, and watchmen with whistles and cloaks. Even the poorest alleyways often had someone on patrol, not to comfort the residents, of course, but to protect the wealthier homes from mischief. Still, their presence gave the night a structure, a kind of calm authority. Outside the city, sleep could be even better. In a countryside villa, the stars were dazzling, unpolluted by the city's haze. Farmers would tuck in just after sunset, rising with the first pink light of dawn. But between the hours of evening and morning, their homes fell into a deep, natural stillness. The walls were mud brick or stone, thick and warm. Wooden shutters kept out the wind. The air was scented with hay, lavender, or the faint tang of herbs left drying from the rafters. Even the animals outside, goats, chickens, a guard dog, had their rhythm. No one needed alarms. The rooster would handle that. Even city folk who worked in the most grueling jobs, the market porters, the street sweepers, the dock hands, often found surprising comfort in rest. Roman law prohibited night labor in many trades. The body needed its recovery, they believed. And though not everyone had a full bed to stretch out on, even a blanket on a quiet rooftop could bring deep rest. In the cooler months, people often slept in shared warmth. Parents with children, servants with each other, curled together like firewood. It wasn't romanticized. It was necessary, but it brought a human closeness many of us rarely experience now. One of the remarkable things about Roman sleep was the way it extended beyond the bedroom. Sleep spilled into daily life. There were naps in the shade after lunch, dozing in the bathhouse after a steam, nodding off during long speeches in the Senate, though that was frowned upon, unless the speaker was particularly dull. Even emperors were known to nap. Augustus was famous for his rest habits, taking short sleeps in the afternoon, sometimes in the garden, sometimes in the library beneath the gentle rustle of scrolls. And then there were the remedies. Romans were great believers in the power of nature to guide sleep. They brewed teas from poppy, chamomile, and valerian. Some rubbed warm oil into their temples, or bathed their feet in salt water before lying down. Many had nighttime routines that stretched over an hour, bathing, eating lightly, prayer, and quiet. It was as if they knew what modern science is only beginning to rediscover, that sleep is not just a biological act, it is a craft, a ceremony. Even those living in tighter quarters, tenants in insulae, the sprawling Roman apartment blocks had their patterns. These buildings could be noisy, prone to fire, and crowded. But still, even here, families created space for sleep. Cloth curtains hung from ropes. Bundled blankets served as both mattress and cover. Children fell asleep, listening to their mothers hum old songs, while neighbors doused their lanterns and climbed into shared beds. Sleep wasn't always private, but it was present. It came when it was time. And now, as your body grows heavier with each breath, imagine yourself in one of those dim, ancient rooms, the walls thick with warmth, the outside world muted, your eyes closing naturally, not from fatigue, but from readiness. You've eaten lightly, bathed gently, said your goodnights. The lamp is out, the silence complete, and as your mind begins to drift, perhaps a dream is already on its way, born on the backs of ancient stars and olive oil-scented air. You wake gently, not with a jolt, but with the soft golden glow of morning light filtering in through a high window. The air is cool, the kind of cool that clings to the skin in just the right way, refreshing but not sharp. A nearby dove coos somewhere above, and the trickle of a courtyard fountain resumes its steady rhythm. You stretch slowly, like a cat, feeling the night still in your limbs. This was sleep, you think, not the stolen kind we know today. This was a complete surrender. In the Roman world, mornings were not rushed. There was no frenzy of alarm clocks or notifications. The day began with purpose, but without panic. In wealthier households, a servant might come in quietly, offering a warm towel and a light morning drink, sometimes honeyed water or diluted wine. For most, the day started with light, opening the shutters, stepping outside into the peristyle or street, greeting the sky. It was ritual, not routine. But let's return to the body, how it felt after sleep in those times. There was no concept of sleep debt, no glaring blue light dragging down melatonin levels. Roman nights were truly dark, utterly dark. No street lamps outside your window, no blinking electronics, no flicker from a digital clock. The only glow came from oil lamps. And once those were extinguished, the night became a velvet void. In that darkness, the body did what it was designed to do. It rested, fully, deeply. Even the architecture supported this. Roman bedrooms weren't designed for productivity. There were no desks, no writing tables, no extra chairs, just a bed, a lamp, a place to sit and reflect, perhaps a small personal shrine. The space itself signaled rest. And unlike modern apartments that seem to buzz with ambient electricity even when off, Roman homes at night went still. The temperature dropped slightly, the air cleared, and the thick stone walls insulated you, not just from heat or cold, but from distraction. And we must talk about sound, or the lack of it. A Roman sleep was often disturbed not by mechanical sounds but by life itself. An owl's call, a neighbor's footsteps, the occasional distant conversation. But these were organic. They had a rhythm, a predictability. There were no cars, no buzzing streetlights, no digital alerts. And because most people rose and slept with the sun, the city as a whole moved like a slow tide, not a constant throb. It was possible, even in a dense insula, to have quiet. Of course, not everyone lived in comfort. Rome was a city of extremes. Some citizens, particularly the poor, slept on straw in shared quarters. But even they, in their own way, preserved sacred sleep. It was common for families to create makeshift privacy with hung cloths, even inside a crowded room. A flickering lamp might be shared between several households. Sleep was communal, yes, but never abandoned. And if sleep came after hardship, it came heavier, deeper, with a kind of earned stillness. And there were customs, too. Bedtime rituals passed from generation to generation. Some would place a small coin or trinket under the mattress to ward off bad dreams. Others would mark the lintel with a protective sign. Many households burned herbs like rosemary or bay leaf before bed, not just for aroma, but as spiritual cleansing. Even in the homes of hardened soldiers or gruff laborers, you might find traces of this nighttime reverence. Sleep was too important to leave unguarded. Children, especially, had their own sleep worlds. In Roman families, children often shared sleeping spaces, curled together on mats with older siblings, or even parents. They were told stories, myths of gods and beasts, of heroic journeys and clever mortals. These weren't just entertainment. They were grounding. As a child drifted off to tales of Hercules or Odysseus, they carried those adventures into their dreams. And unlike today, bedtime wasn't something negotiated or fought. It was natural, even welcome. And let's not forget the midday rest. The meridioso, what we might call a siesta, was practiced widely. During the hottest part of the day, work paused. Shops closed. Even courts sometimes recessed. In the countryside, this was survival, resting under an olive tree with a wide-brimmed hat over your eyes. In the city, it was a pause to stretch, lie down, perhaps dream again. Romans understood the value of spacing rest throughout the day, not shoving it all into an exhausted pile after midnight. So now, as you lie still, listening, letting these ancient rhythms wrap around you, imagine what it meant to fall asleep in that world. No schedule pressing down on you, no overlit ceilings or midnight caffeine jolts, just darkness, silence, and the soft certainty that sleep is allowed, celebrated. You are not crashing, you are closing your eyes with purpose, because your body and your world agree, it is time. Sleep in ancient Rome wasn't a solitary event. It was a part of the rhythm of life, woven into the day like meals, conversations, and prayers. And part of what made Roman sleep so deep was how little it was disrupted by the endless distractions we know today. You didn't fall asleep worrying about notifications or bank statements or traffic. You worried about weather, grain prices, maybe a neighbor's gossip. But those worries were local, human-sized, and at night they quieted. Let's take a walk through a Roman villa rustica, a country home outside the city. As evening fell, the last of the day's chores would be winding down. The fields, once buzzing with activity, would fall still. Animals fed and quiet, their sounds fading with the light. Within the house, the final tasks were slow and deliberate. Clay pots wiped and stacked, fire embers coaxed into a gentle glow for morning's bread. Then a final washing of hands and feet. This mattered. The Romans believed that sleep welcomed a form of sacred vulnerability, and one should be clean when meeting it. The bedroom itself might be small, low ceiling, thick walls of mud brick or stone, a single oil lamp, guttering softly on a shelf. The bed frame would be wood, sometimes a repurposed bench, sometimes nothing more than woven reeds and wool stuffed into linen. There is something deeply settling about a space built entirely from natural materials. Nothing buzzed, nothing blinked. Only the breeze through the window and the hum of the countryside filled the space. For urban Romans living in insulae, the reality was a little different. Rooms might be shared, ceilings low, walls thin, but even here people carved out sleep with intentionality. They hung woven screens to create privacy. They knew which hours were safest and quietest for rest. A father might fall asleep on a rolled mat, while a mother sang a child to sleep in her arms. And the lullabies, they were soft, often in the form of whispered poems, some passed down for generations. Fragments of these still exist on ancient tablets. Budments of these still exist on ancient tablets. The voices of long-gone parents singing their children into dreams. And if we move higher up the social ladder, into the homes of senators and magistrates, we find an even more elaborate relationship with sleep. There were separate rooms for resting during the day, chambers built for optimal airflow in summer, heavy woolen hangings for winter, beds lined with feather-stuffed cushions and pillows scented with myrrh, servants trained to manage lighting and warmth precisely. And even here, where luxury abounded, the priority remained stillness, silence. Preparation for sleep wasn't rushed, it was performed. The Roman understanding of sleep was not purely physical. They believed dreams carried weight, messages from the gods, echoes of the soul, even glimpses of other lives. It was common to keep a record of dreams or consult a temple priest if something particularly vivid occurred. Sleep and the divine were interwoven. One lay down not just to recover, but to receive. Temples devoted to Asclepius, the god of healing, often had sleeping chambers for this very purpose. You would rest there in hopes of receiving a dream that might lead to healing or wisdom. Even public buildings acknowledged sleep's importance. The design of many bathhouses included resting rooms, places to cool the body and slow the mind before returning home. Benches carved from marble were surprisingly comfortable when warmed by afternoon sun. Roman architects considered airflow, lighting, even acoustics to maintain the calm. Cities were built with an awareness of rest, far more than our concrete jungles today. You might be surprised to learn that even Roman soldiers prioritized sleep. In the legions, order was everything. Camp layouts followed strict patterns. Tents were pitched with care, sleep rotations enforced. Guards worked in shifts, so others could sleep safely. Bedding was simple, animal skins or mats rolled tightly, but the routines were sacred. A tired soldier was a dead one. Even amid war, Rome respected rest. And now, as you imagine yourself lying in a modest Roman room, the last embers of the hearth fading, the gentle rustle of linen across your shoulder, take a breath, a deep one, the kind that settles you from within. Picture a world where nothing demands your attention, where night is respected, and where sleep is not stolen, but given, not an interruption, but a return. Outside your room, the city slows, a soft footstep, a breeze, the familiar hush of a society that understands the art of sleeping well. No one is watching you. There's no performance here. You are simply allowed to rest. Your breath is your lullaby, your heartbeat, the rhythm of an ancient world. Let your thoughts soften, scatter, dissolve. This is where you belong tonight. In the quiet middle of the night, when the stars are high and the earth itself seems to pause, Romans often experienced what they called the watch. This was the natural waking that occurred between the first and second sleep. It was not considered a problem or a disorder. It was expected, a gift even. In this time, some would rise and tend the hearth, or read by lamplight, or sit in silent contemplation beneath the open sky. Others whispered prayers or visited neighbors for quiet talk. It was a moment of inward turning, a time for reflection, not activity. Imagine this now. You've stirred from your first sleep, not from anxiety or disruption, but because your body is gently telling you it's time to be still and aware. The room is hushed. You sit up, stretch slowly, and light a small lamp. The oil inside burns quietly, casting golden shadows against the wall. You pour a little warm water into a cup. Sip it slowly. There's no pressure to return to sleep. You're not broken. You're simply in rhythm with something older than clocks. Some philosophers, like Seneca, wrote about these quiet night hours as times of great clarity. A person, half-rested, not yet burdened by the coming day, could see life more clearly. They journaled, prayed, meditated on moral questions. For the deeply spiritual, it was an hour of communion with the gods. For others, it was just a few precious minutes of solitude. And then, naturally, the second sleep would come, gently and without effort, as if the mind had needed to clear itself before surrendering again. By dawn, the second sleep would be ending, slowly, gently. The sun didn't rise with a roar. It slid over the horizon, spilling light across tiled rooftops and dusty courtyards. You might hear a rooster call, or the soft groan of wood as shutters were opened. Fires would be rekindled, bread shaped, water drawn. But for a few moments more, you'd remain still, letting the last wisps of dream fade like morning mist. You wouldn't feel behind. You wouldn't feel rushed. You would feel awake. What's remarkable is how completely this approach to sleep contrasts with ours. We often fight rest. We treat waking at night like failure. But for the Romans, it was expected. It was built into the design of their lives. In fact, some historians believe that this biphasic sleep pattern was the norm across the ancient world, from Greece to Mesopotamia. A rhythm lost not to evolution, but to electricity. Let's shift now, just slightly, to the communal aspect of sleep. In Roman tenement blocks, those great sprawling insulae, sleep was rarely private. You might hear your neighbor breathing through the thin wall. You might fall asleep to the sound of a distant lullaby, or a couple whispering behind a curtain. And yet, this proximity created something often missing in modern life: shared stillness. In a city of over 1 million people, the very air would seem to soften at night, as if all breathing together. In elite homes, privacy was a luxury, but even there, the night was rarely entirely solitary. Servants slept nearby. Children often curled up on fur mats at the foot of their parents' beds. Even emperors, for all their grandeur, were attended by night watchmen, scribes, or physicians, who might be called at any hour. The silence wasn't empty. It was inhabited, alive with the gentle hush of others resting near you. And then there were those who worked through the night. Not many, but some temple keepers who tended eternal flames, midwives on urgent call, healers watching over the sick. Even these people knew that their rest would come in time. In shifts, in corners, in the day, they too respected the cycle. You didn't burn out. You balanced. You worked, then stopped. You were tired, so you slept. It sounds simple, and in Rome, it was. Let's not forget the dream interpreters. In a city so intertwined with omens and signs, dreams were no trivial matter. A senator might cancel a vote if he dreamt of a dark bird. A farmer might wait to plant until his wife dreamt of rain. Entire books were written, one eromancy manuals, filled with symbols and their meanings. You dreamt of a fish, wealth, a broken lamp, betrayal, a bath, purification. Your nighttime mind wasn't just yours. It belonged to the gods. And now, here you are, lying still, listening, imagining the texture of linen under your hands, the cool whisper of night across your face, the way your heartbeat slows without you even asking. You are safe. Not just because of walls or locks, But because the world around you, this ancient Roman world, understands that sleep is sacred, you don't need to do anything but breathe. And in a little while, you will sleep again, deeper than before, carried by tradition, held by silence, guarded by a rhythm that once stretched across the empire. You stir before dawn, not from urgency, but from instinct. The sky outside your small shuttered window is still a deep blue, stars lingering on the edges like breath on glass. You lie still for a moment, not quite awake, not quite dreaming. The stone walls of your room hold the cool of night, and you feel the shift inside your body, rested, heavy, quiet. You've had your second sleep, and now the day waits, not with sharp elbows, but with gentle invitation. Before you rise, you listen. The world around you begins to stretch. A neighbor lifts a latch. A rooster clears its throat. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays with comic solemnity. You smile at that. The city isn't roaring awake, it's exhaling. You pull aside your blanket, feet finding the familiar chill of the floor, and reach for your tunic. The morning routine begins. In most Roman homes, the first light is a shared ritual. Fires are rekindled, leftover embers brought back to life with dried reeds. The hearth becomes the heart again. You warm your hands, and maybe a bit of bread from yesterday. Olive oil glistens in a small dish. A clay cup holds water drawn the evening before. No one is shouting, no one is rushing. This too is part of why sleep came so easily, because waking was not a shock, but a drift. For the wealthy, the household stirs gently. Slaves move quietly to prepare the atrium. Light lamps in the darker corners brush dust from the mosaic tiles. In the cubicula, the sleeping rooms, curtains are drawn aside and fresh linens brought in. A warm towel, a sip of watered wine, perhaps a touch of perfume. The day begins not with bluster, but with care, and even the bustling kitchen staff knows to keep their clanging to a minimum until the master of the house has stirred. But this wasn't just about etiquette. It was about respect for the sanctity of rest. Romans saw the home as a place of layered time. There were hours for work, hours for feast, hours for worship, and hours, essential, holy hours for sleep. And each was protected by custom and design. The architecture itself flowed with that rhythm, thick walls to hold silence, interior courtyards to hold air, high windows to hold the changing light. The spaces breathed with you. Outside, the streets begin to stir. Market carts creak past, pushed by yawning porters. A boy whistles, carrying fresh fish strung on twine. The baker opens his shutters, warm air blooming into the alley. You step out for a moment, feeling the breeze on your skin, the smell of baked bread and olive pressings, and fresh dawn. Even in this moment, standing barefoot in your doorway, you feel no dissonance between night and day. The transition is smooth, no alarms, no inboxes, just the slow wheel of time turning, as it always has. And then, there are those who can sleep again. The elderly who nap after the morning meal. The children curled up in woven cradles or shaded alcoves. Even laborers after hours under the sun will return home to stretch out on cool stone floors and close their eyes for a while. Naps were not guilty indulgences. They were part of the day, valued, restored. No one measured sleep in lost hours. They measured it in quality, in depth, in how whole you felt when you awoke. By midday, the world glowed with warmth, and under that sun, sleep crept in again. Not in full, but in fragments. A doze on a shaded bench, a slow blink between conversations. Roman homes embraced it. Benches built into walls, draped with soft cloth, courtyards filled with rustling leaves and murmuring fountains. Even the animals rested, the goats stretched in the dust, the dogs nestled in shady corners. All life moved to the same rhythm: wake, rest, wake again. By nightfall, the pattern returned: baths, meals, conversations, the slow winding down, and sleep came again, not as collapse, but as ceremony, as a return. And in this return, the Romans found clarity. Their minds quieted, their hearts steadied, their lives unfolded not in frantic motion, but in layers of intention: rest, wake, breathe, reflect, sleep. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine you are a part of that rhythm. Your breath is not separate from the world. It's in step with it. Your bed is not a crash site, but a resting ground. You have earned this stillness. It is sacred, and it is safe. In this ancient world, sleep is not an escape. It is a return home. There's something about sleeping in a world that truly gets dark, not just dimmed, not filtered through curtains or shaded by blinds, but honest, complete darkness, the kind of blackness where your eyes stop searching, where the space around you vanishes, and all that remains is your body, your breath, and the slow pull of sleep. That was the Roman night. No neon, no blinking routers, just the hush of oil lamps extinguished and the soft glow of stars beyond shuttered windows. For many Romans, night was a friend. It wasn't filled with threats or chores or the pressure to finish one more thing. It was permission to stop, to be still. In rural areas, nightfall came early, without artificial light to push the boundary. People retired soon after the sun. And in that extended envelope of quiet, the body found a different kind of rest, a deeper one not shortened by scrolling thumbs or broken by glowing clocks. You might think the ancient world was harsh and loud and full of danger, and in many ways it was. But nighttime softened it. The roughest soldier became silent under a sky full of stars. The poorest farmer, after a day of toil, lay back in the dirt and gazed upward, feeling perhaps not rich, but connected. Rest had a kind of equality. The emperor might sleep on silks, and the laborer on straw, but both required darkness. Both surrendered, both dreamed. Even in the height of Rome's power, sleep was never considered weak. It wasn't treated like a problem or a barrier to productivity. It was part of the ideal citizen's routine. To rest well was a form of discipline. The Stoics, those proud thinkers of virtue and logic, advocated for a clear routine, including consistent sleep. They didn't see rest as lazy, they saw it as balance. Seneca himself advised rising early, but never at the expense of the body's needs. You woke not because you must, but because your body said enough. And if you were restless, Rome had answers, from natural remedies to divine ones. Herbal infusions were common: poppy seed, fennel, valerian, and rose. Scented pillows were popular too, stuffed with chamomile or lavender, wrapped in clean linen. Those with spiritual leanings might wear protective amulets or place small statues of household gods by their bedside. The rituals weren't empty. They were anchors, tiny personal traditions that told the mind, it's time now, let go. Even children were taught the rhythm. In many homes, a mother or nurse would sing softly, rocking the little ones in her arms. The songs were simple, repetitive, filled with references to stars, rivers, and protective spirits. These lullabies became part of the architecture of the home, just as important as the bricks and beams. Sleep wasn't a separate thing. It was stitched into the culture, into the sounds, the scents, the air itself. And the air, how fresh it must have been. Roman homes were built with airflow in mind. Walls that breathed, courtyards that circulated wind, roof openings that pulled heat up and away. In the countryside, doors might be left open, only a curtain flapping in the night breeze. There were no buzzing air conditioners or rattling vents. The cool came naturally, carrying the scent of olive groves, dusty roads, and distant rain. So when you imagine sleep in Roman times, don't imagine austerity. Imagine luxury, not in material wealth, but in the permission to be still, to stop when the day is done, to lie down in a world that honors rest. And while not everyone had the same comfort, the same bed, or even the same number of hours, they all shared the rhythm. Sleep wasn't optional. It was essential, expected, protected, and that protection extended into law. In some periods, noise at night was strictly regulated. Bakers who worked early were encouraged to stay quiet. Market deliveries were scheduled with sleep in mind. Even temples, often noisy by day, lowered their activity after dusk. The city became something else after dark, not a place of production, but of pause, of restoration. Now, as you lie there in your own room, whatever shape it takes, bed, blanket, quiet lamp, I invite you to feel that same rhythm. Let your breath follow the rise and fall of the night. Let your thoughts wander like Roman footsteps over quiet marble floors. Let your eyelids grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from peace. The world, ancient or modern, has not forgotten how to sleep. It only needs to be reminded. You settle into the thought that maybe, just maybe, the Romans knew something we've forgotten. Not about technology or empire, but about rest. About what it means to allow your body to slow, your mind to uncoil, your breath to stretch itself long and lazy like a cat in the sun. Because here in their world, sleep isn't a task, it's a state, a return to something older than Rome itself. Imagine now you're in a Roman port town. The sea is close. It's scent in every breeze. You've finished a long day helping unload cargo, amphorae of wine, bolts of cloth, dried figs, and the sun has set behind the terracotta rooftops. Your muscles are sore, but satisfied. You've eaten, you've laughed with friends around a brazier fire. And now you lie back in your simple room, where salt air drifts through a lattice window, and the only sound is the whisper of waves pulling back into the dark. Even sailors, used to the rocking of ships and the dampness of sea air, found a way to sleep well. The Roman Navy built vessels with areas dedicated to rest. Hammocks were rare, but sailors often lined their bedrolls with waxed cloth to keep moisture out. They shared stories before sleep, about home, about storms survived, about girls in other ports. Then they slept, deeply, because they knew tomorrow would come with oars, with salt, with wind. Back on land, the rhythms of Roman cities pulsed like breath. They were alive, but not relentless. Night markets shut early, taverns dimmed their lamps, private homes enclosed their spaces, drawing curtains, dampening light. You didn't sleep in a city that shouted, you slept in a city that whispered, and even in the heart of Rome itself, there were corners so quiet, so perfectly still, that sleep arrived like a gentle guest, not an intruder. Consider the homes of scholars and poets, Cicero, Pliny, Virgil. They structured their lives not only for learning, but for rest. These were men who prized silence, who studied by lamplight and walked before dawn. They wrote of sleep not as something to overcome, but to cherish. Pliny the Elder kept detailed accounts of his dreams and their meanings. He once described sleep as the reset of the soul, and for all his busyness, writing, governing, observing the stars, he always made room for it. And so did the average citizen, a cobbler, a baker, a grain merchant. They all understood the value of winding down. After supper, after bathing, after stories and chores, there was a kind of exhale. You knew it. You felt it. It was in the cooling air, the dimming sky, the way people walked slower on their way home. Sleep wasn't something to resist. It was part of the day's conclusion, like a comma at the end of a sentence, letting the thought breathe. It's easy to forget that before sleep hygiene was a buzzword, it was just life. Romans didn't schedule their wind-down routines. They lived them. Light faded, voices softened, food was eaten in smaller portions, wine diluted with water, music quiet if any, all of it nudging the body towards stillness. The shift into night was communal, atmospheric. Even those walking home late did so quietly, sandals brushing stone, as though aware they were stepping through someone's dream. And so now, centuries later, you can feel it too. You can borrow their rhythm. You can close your eyes not out of weariness, but out of understanding. The world outside may be noisy, but inside, in your space, you create your own Rome. A room without urgency, a night without pressure. You are not scrolling for peace. You are already within it. You need only breathe. Let your thoughts drift now to the sound of sandals in a corridor. A soft lamp flickering in a wall niche, the scent of olive oil and dust, of warm wool and sea air. You are here. In a moment, both real and imagined, the past holds space for you. Its lessons aren't lost. They're waiting. Sleep is one of them. Perhaps the most ancient one of all. You don't have to dream of marble palaces or triumphal arches. You don't have to be a senator or a centurion. You only have to rest, as millions once did before you, in silence, in safety, in rhythm. Let the night have you. Let it do what it has always done. Carry you gently to the other side of wakefulness, where stories settle and peace lives. The softness of a Roman night has a way of settling into your skin, doesn't it? Even now, just by imagining it, your body begins to mimic it. Your shoulders drop, your jaw loosens, your breath deepens. In that ancient world, there was no race to fall asleep, no blue light to battle, no guilt tied to rest. Only the quiet, steady understanding that night was meant for healing, and not just for the body, for the mind too. You see, the Romans didn't compartmentalize rest as something separate from thought. They believed that a clear mind led to better sleep, and that sleep in turn refined the mind. This was reflected in their evening habits. Many would read aloud before bed, not just for knowledge, but for the rhythm of the words. The cadence lulled them. Others preferred listening, having a servant or family member read a favorite passage or recite an old tale. It wasn't about productivity. It was about pleasure. Even conversation played a role. After the evening meal, families often gathered to talk, not about schedules or business, but about life, philosophy, anecdotes, dreams. Children listened, wide-eyed, absorbing the tone more than the words. There was something sacred in the slowness of those moments, in the way a simple story or a remembered quote from Cicero could carry the room into a gentle hush. Laughter was welcome, but it was soft. It didn't need to rise above anything. The night was already quiet. In rural homes, where evenings were even simpler, this kind of storytelling often took place by firelight. Grandparents spinning tales of forest spirits, of wolves and heroes, of distant wars and foolish emperors. These stories weren't necessarily written down, but they were remembered, passed on. And as the firelight danced on the walls and the words fell into silence, the children would slip into sleep, right there on the floor, heads against their mother's laps, breathing in the scent of smoke and rosemary. Let's step into one of those homes now. You're lying on a woven mat beside the hearth. Above you, the beams of the ceiling stretch across like dark ribs. The fire has gone to embers, glowing gently. You hear the rhythmic creak of a wooden door swaying slightly in the breeze. The world outside is wrapped in night. Inside, only the soft rustle of a blanket being pulled tighter, and your own breath, slow and even. The Romans didn't separate themselves from nature when they slept. They didn't box out the world with insulation and double-glazed windows. They let the world in, at least the quiet parts, the breeze, the stars, the occasional bark of a dog or the hoot of an owl. These were not disruptions. They were companions, markers of the hour, reminders that you were not alone in your rest, that the world too was sleeping. Even the moon had its place. Roman poets often referenced it in their descriptions of night, silver light casting shadows in courtyards, slipping through lattice windows to touch sleeping faces. There was no fear of the dark, no rush to erase it. Darkness was a blanket, and the moon was a lamp that asked nothing of you. You didn't need to respond. You only needed to feel. And when dreams came, they were treated with reverence. A vivid dream wasn't something you shook off in the morning. It was shared, discussed, interpreted. In some households, the first act after waking was to recount your dream aloud. What did it mean? Who had visited you in the night? A lost parent? A god? A memory? Dreams were not frivolous. They were clues, maps, omens. To dream was to participate in something larger than yourself. So tonight, if dreams come to you, let them. Let them flow like a river you don't need to steer. Let your mind wander where it will, without judgment or control. You are in the company of millions of sleepers across centuries. Farmers and emperors, mothers and philosophers. All of them once lay still in the dark, breath soft, hearts open to the world behind their eyes. And as you drift now, you carry their rhythm. You carry their silence. You carry their wisdom, stored not in books or monuments, but in the gentle, repeated act of closing one's eyes, breathing out and letting go. Sleep was not invented in modern times. It was perfected long before, and you, dear listener, are part of that lineage. Welcome back. Sleep, to the ancient Romans, wasn't just personal. It was social, cultural, even architectural. It was stitched into the very design of how they built and moved and lived. You can see it in their homes, the layout of the domus, with the cubicula bedchambers, placed just so insulated from the noise of the street. You can see it in their villas, where sleeping quarters were often nestled deep inside, where the coolness of stone could embrace the sleeper and hold the heat of the day at bay. It was as though the buildings themselves were designed to lull people to rest. Imagine entering such a space. A Roman villa near the edge of a vineyard. The day has ended, and twilight has draped its soft blue cloth across the hills. Inside, the walls are painted in warm reds and ochres, glowing in the last of the oil lamp light. You walk across the mosaic floor to your room, sandals slipping off with a hush. There is no glass in the windows, but shutters carved from cypress wood. They're closed now, not just to keep the cool air in, but to keep the night close intimate. In this intimacy with the night, it's something modern life has tried to replace with routines and rules. But Romans didn't need a bedtime checklist. They followed the cues of the world around them. The setting sun, the darkening courtyards, the soft hush that fell over the streets. You didn't decide to sleep so much as fall into it, like a natural descent into silence. Even the humblest homes followed this pattern. One lamp, one blanket, one long breath. In the countryside, far from Rome's bustle, the world moved even slower. A shepherd might return from the hills and light a fire in his hut. He'd eat cheese and bread, drink water from a clay jug, then lie down beside his dog. No clock told him when to rest. His body knew. The stars overhead, bright and sharp in the absence of city light, told him. The soil under his feet told him. The sheep, already bedded down in the grass, told him. In urban neighborhoods, people found rest wherever they could. Some slept on rooftops in warm months, their backs on straw mats, eyes open to the constellations. Others wrapped themselves in cloaks in stairwells or on wooden benches tucked between doorways. These weren't always ideal conditions, but even in scarcity rest came. The rhythm of Roman life, for all its violence and power, held moments of quiet dignity. Sleep was one of them. Romans also believed in balance between labor and repose. The workday ended, not with a jarring halt, but with a natural tapering. Meals were eaten at a measured pace. Socializing came with dim lights and lowered voices. And when the day was done, people didn't fight to stay awake. They allowed themselves to be carried away. It's not that they were less busy than we are. They simply respected the flow. They didn't treat sleep like a thief of time. There were exceptions, of course. Festivals often carried on into the night, and religious rites could unfold beneath the moon. But even these had their own rhythm. After celebration came rest. After the ecstatic came the exhale. The cycle was never broken. It was only expanded. You always returned to stillness. Even Bacchus, god of wine and revelry, eventually passed out. Perhaps beneath a fig tree, perhaps on a lover's lap, but he too slept. And then there were naps, perfectly acceptable, even encouraged. Midday heat in the Roman world could be oppressive, and most people paused their activity in the hottest hours. A nap on a shaded bench or in the quiet corner of a tablinum was not considered indulgent. It was practical, smart. And after it, work resumed, not with grogginess, but with renewed clarity. The body, like the city, knew when to rest and when to rise. This relationship with sleep extended to the spiritual realm as well. Temples, dedicated to healing gods like Asclepius, often included spaces for incubatio, a sacred sleep where one hoped to receive a dream vision, a message, or a cure. Pilgrims would lie down on stone slabs, surrounded by incense and silence, and wait not passively, but attentively. They believed sleep opened a door, and that beyond it, wisdom waited. So tonight, as your breath slows and your body drifts, think of those ancient sleepers, not just the emperors in marble palaces, but the farmers, the sailors, the children, the widows, the scribes. Think of the quiet that wrapped them like a second blanket. Think of the rooms with nothing in them but breath and stone and night, and allow yourself to join them, not in body, but in rhythm, the rhythm of letting go. There's a unique kind of silence that lives in ancient places. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of stillness, a fullness even. You feel it when you walk through old ruins at dusk. You feel it when you sit beneath a cypress tree, listening to nothing but the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a night bird. It's a kind of quiet that fills you up, rather than empties you out. The Romans knew this silence. They didn't fear it. They slept inside of it. Think of the baths, not just as cleansing rituals, but as preludes to rest. The Romans knew the body needed easing into sleep. Hot water softened the muscles. Warm rooms opened the pores, the tepidarium, the caldarium, the slow cooling process. You moved through heat, like descending through layers of tension, until all that was left was the weight of your own breath. And after the bath, a light meal, a little wine, maybe a massage, and then to bed. That, they believed, was how you honored sleep. And they did honor it. In literature, in sculpture, in the way they spoke of it. Sleep wasn't an interruption to the real business of life. It was part of it. Poets wrote of it as a gentle god. Somnus, sleep, was imagined as the twin brother of death, but far less feared. In art, he was shown as a young man with wings, reclining on a bed of poppies, eyes half closed. He didn't take from you, he gave. Dreams, rest, release. In the countryside, temples to sleep were sometimes nestled in groves, far from the bustle of towns. Pilgrims would come seeking peace, not miracles necessarily, but the kind of peace that comes from finally closing your eyes and knowing that no one needs anything from you, that you can just be. They would lie on stone slabs, warmed by the sun, or on animal skins in shaded alcoves, listening to the rustle of olive leaves above them. No pressure, just breath, just stillness. Back in the city, that stillness was harder to find, but not impossible. After dark, Rome transformed. The din of markets faded. The clang of blacksmiths ceased. Torches burned low. Taverns emptied. In the poor districts, sleep was shared on mats, on benches, in tight quarters. But even in that closeness, there was quiet. People understood. You didn't disturb sleep. It was sacred. You let others rest because you too needed to. The wealthy had more space, more comfort, but they didn't sleep longer, just better. Their rooms were arranged to minimize disturbance. Servants trained to move silently. Beds were built higher off the ground to stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Walls were plastered thick. Floors layered with rugs or woven mats. Everything about the space whispered, "Rest is welcome here." And then there were those who wrote by night, quietly by lamplight, wrapped in cloaks. Night was not always for sleep, but it was always for softness. The Roman philosopher and statesman Marcus Aurelius often wrote in the still hours before dawn. His meditations speak of humility, calm, and returning to nature's rhythm. Even he, burdened with the weight of empire, paused to consider his breath, his rest, his place in the quiet. Children slept close to their parents, not tucked away in distant rooms, but curled beside them or just a few steps away. They weren't trained to self-soothe. They were soothed by lullabies, by touch, by the shared warmth of a sleeping space. In their dreams they mattered. A child who dreamt of a bird, or of running water, or of fire, was listened to the next day. Dreams were part of the family story. Some dreams were considered divine, prophetic. A soldier might dream of his mother's embrace, and take it as a sign he would return home safely. A merchant might see a coin split in half and cancel his trade route. Dreams had meaning, not fixed, not always understood, but honored. You didn't laugh off a strange dream. You sat with it. You carried it like a folded note in your pocket, read and reread until it made sense. So as you lie here now, wrapped in the quiet hum of your own space, remember this: you're not just resting, you're part of something ancient. A ritual older than temples, a rhythm older than language. You are breathing in the footsteps of those who lived before you. And as they did, you are surrendering not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. The Roman evening, in all its simplicity, was a time of surrender. Not in the dramatic sense, not as a defeat, but as a deliberate letting go. Letting go of noise, of work, of ambition, of identity even. You stopped being a merchant, a scribe, a farmer, a senator, and returned to something more essential: a body at rest, a soul adrift in silence. The Romans didn't need apps or techniques to unwind. They needed only time and intention, and that they had. Picture yourself now in a modest home outside Pompeii. The air is thick with late summer heat. You've spent the day walking the edges of the vineyards, checking for signs of ripening. Your feet are dusty, your shoulders sore, but there's satisfaction in your limbs, in your sweat. You've worked, you've earned rest. And so, as twilight deepens, you soak your hands in a basin of cool water. The world smells of earth and grape leaves, and faint ash drifting from Vesuvius. And then you lie down. The bed is nothing fancy, just a low wooden frame, lashed with rope, topped with woven reeds, and a worn wool blanket. But your body greets it like an old friend. Your head finds the place it always does. Your hand falls to your side. The room is shadowed, a single oil lamp on a shelf, throwing golden petals of light onto the wall. You hear crickets, distant footsteps, maybe a flute in the next alley, and still you do not move. You do not need to. Even the act of preparing for bed had ritual. In many households, sandals were brushed clean and set neatly by the door. The day's dust was washed from the feet with care. Clothes were folded, not discarded. Lamps were checked. How much oil remained? Would it last the night? And then there was the act of extinguishing the flame, not casually, but deliberately. A final moment of awareness before surrender. The lamp's glow would flicker, then vanish, and darkness would bloom like ink in water. For Romans, to lie in darkness wasn't frightening. It was intimate. They were used to it. Street lighting existed, yes, but only sparsely. Most of the world after sunset was lit by the stars. You could walk a whole neighborhood by moonlight alone. The shadows weren't sinister. They were familiar. They were the arms of night, drawing you in. Your eyes adjusted. Your breath matched the quiet, and then you were gone. Gone to dreams. Yes, but not just any dreams. Romans saw the sleeping mind as a canvas painted by the gods. You didn't just wander aimlessly through dreamland. You received visions, echoes, lessons. Some even claimed to have conversations with dead relatives. Others believed they saw their future, and while not every dream was profound, every one was respected. You didn't shrug it off. You woke slowly, cradled the memory, shared it with your family. You let it linger. And if the dream felt important, strange, symbolic, heavy, you might visit a Vates, a dream interpreter. They would listen carefully, ask questions, consult their scrolls. They might warn you or bless you, or tell you it meant nothing at all. But the process itself was sacred. It meant that your sleeping life was not wasted. It had meaning. Sleep, then, wasn't passive. It was part of living. Even in the temples, rest was a form of worship. You didn't have to chant or sacrifice. You could simply lie down, offer your stillness. Listen for signs. In sanctuaries dedicated to sleep and dreams, like the Asclepians, you might spend a night on a stone bed, beneath sacred inscriptions, waiting for a vision, and people traveled miles to do this. Just to rest in a holy place. Just to let sleep reveal what waking could not. And what was revealed? Sometimes nothing, sometimes healing, sometimes peace. But always something felt. A shift, a clarity, a release. That's what Roman sleep offered. Not escape, but arrival. You arrived at your truest self, stripped of roles and tasks, left only with your breath, your body, your spirit. And in that space, you weren't broken. You weren't behind. You weren't anything but human and at peace. So breathe in deeply. Let your shoulders fall. Let your tongue rest against the roof of your mouth. Let your fingers uncurl. You are not in a race. You are not a machine. You are a sleeper in a long tradition of sleepers. Your room may not have stone walls or oil lamps, but the silence, the rhythm, the surrender that's eternal, that's yours. Let us take a small journey now, deeper into the corners of Roman life, where sleep took on more than restfulness, more than comfort. In some homes, sleep became a method of connection, not only with the divine, but with the rhythms of one another. Imagine a Roman family sleeping side by side, not because space was scarce, though sometimes it was, but because closeness offered a kind of calm we've all forgotten. The child nestled between parents, siblings curled along the wall, an elderly grandmother resting nearby. The sounds of breathing, the shifts of bodies in blankets, the familiar cadence of sleep shared, that was safety. This wasn't unusual, even among the affluent. While the beds may have been private, the sense of shared sleep was present in the home. Slaves slept in small alcoves near their masters, not just to be available, but because that's how households functioned together. The entire home would drift off as one, and rise again with the same dawn. In fact, some Roman texts mention the subtle pride in being part of a household so well regulated that everyone's sleep came and went in harmony. But the deepest sleep was often found where the air was stillest in the countryside. There you might sleep under the stars. No roof overhead, just the gentle sway of reeds nearby, the soft chirping of crickets, and the glow of the moon laying itself across your skin like silk. Farmers and shepherds spoke of this sleep as the true sleep, what we might call today uninterrupted, dream-rich slumber. With no street noise, no artificial light, and a body tired from physical labor, the moment you closed your eyes, you slipped beneath the surface of wakefulness like a stone into water. Even their language honored this experience. The Latin verb quiescere meant not only to rest, but to become quiet, to become still. It wasn't just the body that needed to stop. It was the mind, the spirit, the environment. To quiesce meant to enter into a kind of pact with stillness. The same root gives us words like requiem and acquiesce, which echo with that sense of surrender. To sleep well was to give yourself over to quiesce, to peace. In some homes, sleep was enhanced through careful use of scent. Romans adored perfumes, and often infused their sleeping spaces with calming herbs. Sackets of lavender and crushed rose petals were tucked under pillows. Myrrh was burned in small ceramic pots to cleanse and calm the space. Even the beds themselves, especially for the wealthy, were rubbed with oils scented with cinnamon or almond. Sleep entered through the nose, slid through the veins, and wrapped itself around the heart. Music, too, found its place. Simple flutes, lyres, and even soft drumming were used in lullabies and evening rituals. The goal wasn't to entertain, it was to guide the body's descent into sleep. The music was repetitive, gentle, almost hypnotic. If you had walked past an open window in a Roman neighborhood at dusk, you might have heard its soft melodies twining through the dark, meant not for celebration, but for release. Children were taught to respect sleep as a necessary part of life, not as a punishment, not as a thing to resist. Stories were told to prepare them for dreaming. Small charms were tied near their cots. Some homes placed protective figures like household gods or painted eyes above sleeping places, not to ward off literal threats, but to maintain a presence of calm, a visual reassurance that even in sleep they were watched over. And sleep, in turn, watched over the adults. For the Roman who had lived a full day, walked the hills, debated in the forum, tended their stalls, prayed at the shrine, sleep was the final step in the daily ritual. It was not rushed, it was earned. The heavier the day, the more sacred the surrender, and no matter what the day held, conflict, sorrow, celebration, joy, the night accepted all of it. Sleep was where Romans laid down their burdens without shame. Some philosophers even argued that sleep was where we met the truest parts of ourselves, that in dreams, stripped of ambition and identity, we glimpsed who we really were. Stoics believed that peace in sleep reflected peace in life. If you lay down with a clear conscience and woke with a quiet heart, then your life, by their measure, was well lived. Sleep became a mirror, not just of the body's health, but of the soul's alignment. So now, as your own thoughts begin to drift, think of that. Not as pressure, but as comfort that you are joining an ancient lineage, not of warriors or rulers, but of sleepers, people who laid themselves down, night after night, not as escape, but as devotion. To sleep deeply is to trust the night, your body, your place in the world. In a sense, it's the oldest form of faith we know. There's a sacred familiarity to sleep when it's seen as the closing of a full circle. The Romans, keen observers of cycles, celestial, agricultural, emotional, understood this deeply. They believed sleep was not the end of the day, but the natural return to balance. Like the sun slipping below the horizon, only to rise again, sleep was a descent that prepared you to rise whole. This cyclical vision shaped everything: their architecture, their routines, and even their stories. They told tales of gods who slept, not in weakness, but in power. Jupiter resting between thunderbolts, Mars withdrawing after war to lie in a lover's arms. Even Mercury, the restless messenger, found time to recline in caves hidden beneath the earth. These myths weren't just entertainment, they modeled life. If the gods could rest, so could man. And not only could, but should. In literature, sleep was often the threshold between worlds. A hero dreams before a great journey. A general sees a vision before battle. A farmer dreams of good harvests or of storm warnings. These dreams weren't dismissed. They were embraced, decoded, preserved. Entire books were written just to understand them. Manuals of dream interpretation passed down like heirlooms. To sleep in Roman times was to open a door. You never knew what might step through. And yet there was no fear in that. Romans were not afraid of the dark the way we sometimes are. Night wasn't seen as a void. It was seen as full of stars, of ancestors, of possibilities. The hours after sundown held meaning. The air became thick with presence. In temples and quiet homes, it was believed that the boundary between mortal and divine was thinner at night. You might lie in your bed and feel, without knowing why, that someone long gone was nearby. The Lairs household gods stood near many Roman sleeping spaces. Small statues, often tucked into wall niches, they represented family spirits, protectors, ancestors. Before bed, a family might offer them a bit of bread, a few drops of wine, or a simple whispered word. Not as superstition, but as participation. In sleep, they believed we did not go alone. We entered the night with companions, seen and unseen, and the night itself responded. Even the sounds that surrounded Roman sleep were different from what we know today. No buzz of streetlights, no hum of electronics. Instead, the chirping of crickets, the howl of a distant wolf, the murmur of a breeze against the shutters. These were natural lullabies, not interruptions. Romans fell asleep with their environment, not in spite of it. In wealthier homes, calming water features were added to the courtyards, small fountains or pools designed to echo softly through the night. The gurgling of water was believed to encourage sleep, to slow the heartbeat. Even light was designed to soothe. Oil lamps gave a flickering glow, never harsh. You didn't go from a bright screen to darkness. You went from amber flame to black silence. Some Romans even believed that the quality of your dreams depended on your sleeping position. There were recommendations: sleep on your right side to avoid nightmares. Elevate your head slightly with a folded cloth to promote calm. Don't eat too heavily before bed. Don't drink too much wine, just enough to soften the mind, not dull it. These weren't hard rules. They were shared wisdom, passed like recipes. Everyone had their own little traditions, and for those who couldn't sleep, there was no shame. Restlessness was met with remedies, not ridicule. A bath, a walk, a prayer to Somnus, a soft tonic made with herbs and honey. You didn't blame yourself for being awake. You worked with it. Sleep was a partner, not a prize to be won. If it didn't come, you waited patiently. You sat in the quiet and watched the lamp's shadow move across the wall. Eventually, sleep always returned. So now, as your breath grows slower and your body begins to let go, think of that lamp flickering in some Roman room, of a figure lying beneath woven blankets, breathing just as you are now, not in a rush, not in fear, but in rhythm, with the dark, with the silence, with something far older than time. You are not alone in this moment. You are in the company of thousands of years of sleepers. Let yourself join them. Now imagine you are a traveler, just arrived at a Roman mansio, one of the empire's official roadside inns, scattered along its vast network of roads. The sun has dipped behind the hills, The horses are unhitched, and you've had your fill of coarse bread and olive paste. A small clay lamp flickers beside the cot, offered to you for the night. And even though you're far from home, there's a familiarity in the setting, the hush, the coolness of stone, the thick dark beyond the window shutters. Sleep here too is sacred. Romans traveled extensively, soldiers, merchants, envoys, pilgrims, and yet wherever they went, they carried with them the customs of rest. They expected it to be honored, even when sleeping in foreign places. Hostels and guest houses were judged not only by their food and cleanliness, but by how easily one could drift into slumber there. Was the bed straw fresh? Did the walls muffle noise from the stables? Did the breeze reach the room without too much draft? Sleep wasn't secondary. It was part of the measure of a place. In military camps, things were different, but not without attention to rest. Roman soldiers, even amid campaigns, followed strict rotations for sleep. Camp layouts were precise, barracks placed to allow for quiet when possible, guards assigned in shifts to ensure uninterrupted rest for the others. After a day of training or battle, soldiers stripped their gear, rubbed sore limbs with oil, and lay down in rows, their heads often touching the hilts of their swords, their bodies wrapped in cloaks. And even then, many wrote in letters home how deeply they slept. Exhaustion meeting order, discipline meeting peace. Some of the most fascinating accounts of Roman sleep come from their letters and journals, glimpses of everyday people. A young woman writes to her brother, "Last night I dreamt of our mother and woke with a warmth I could not explain." A farmer describes the feeling of waking slowly with the first chirps of birds, not to an alarm, but to light pressing against his eyelids. Sleep for them wasn't just bodily. It was emotional. It was memory made physical. Even Roman funerary inscriptions often referenced rest. "He sleeps now in peace," one might read, or "Her sleep is eternal, beneath the olives she once tended." Sleep and death were not the same, but they were kin, both viewed with reverence. You didn't speak of the dead as gone. You spoke of them as resting. The language gave permission to grieve gently, not in fear, but in love. And so it's no surprise that sleep became a metaphor for many things in Roman thought. Philosophers spoke of the sleeper as someone closest to truth, unburdened by logic, open to meaning. Writers likened sleep to a journey, a kind of miniature death followed by rebirth each morning. To rise was to return, and each return gave the sleeper a chance to be a little more whole. Roman medicine, too, understood the power of sleep. While their knowledge wasn't what ours is now, their instincts were right. Sleep as cure, sleep as balance. Physicians like Galen and Celsus prescribed rest not just for exhaustion, but for digestion, melancholy, fever, and heartbreak. Sleep was not something to fight through. It was often the first thing to restore. It was the body's oldest healer. And when sleep was elusive, they listened. They asked about stress, diet, relationships, recent travels. Remedies might include warmed milk with herbs, walking at dusk, soft music, or gentle massage with oil of poppy or almond. If those failed, a priest might be consulted, not because the issue was unclean, but because the soul needed tending. Sleeplessness was seen as a sign, a message, something to be explored, not ignored. The night to the Romans was never empty. It was full of presence. The stars above, the earth's gentle exhale, the rustling of trees and linen and breath. To sleep was to align with all of it, not to cut yourself off, but to tune yourself in. And even though their world could be chaotic, it knew how to quiet itself, how to surrender, how to rest. So let your body follow that same path now. Let your muscles lengthen. Let your heart slow. Let your thoughts soften, like fading voices in an empty room. You don't have to reach for sleep. You don't have to make it happen. It's already on its way. coming to wrap around you the way it once did around emperors and artisans, shepherds and children. The darkness is not blank. It is ancient, and it knows your name. Let's slow things down even further now, and find ourselves nestled deep in the quietest hour of a Roman night. The moment just before true slumber takes hold. The oil lamp has burned low. The walls of the home, which held the echo of dinner and conversation just an hour ago, have settled into a stillness so thick it feels like fabric. Outside, a dog sighs in its sleep. You're no longer awake, but not yet dreaming. This in-between moment, this gentle floating, was treasured by the Romans. They knew, perhaps better than we do, that falling asleep was not a plunge but a descent, a process. They prepared for it, not only with baths or wine or lullabies, but with intention. They let the day finish. They didn't carry it into the night. A merchant didn't recount his sales as he lay down. A senator didn't rehearse tomorrow's speech. A potter didn't replay the day's imperfections. They allowed night to be a boundary, and they respected it. That respect extended to the world around them. You didn't wake someone without cause. You didn't let your lamp burn too brightly and disturb a neighbor in the next room. You certainly didn't play music late or talk too loudly in a shared courtyard. Sleep was a shared experience, and it was treated with reverence. To disturb another's rest was not just impolite, it was un-Roman. It broke the rhythm of the household, the street, even the city. In fact, the Romans believed that when everyone in a space rested together, a kind of harmony settled in. Temples were often closed at night, not only to protect the sacred, but to allow the spirits to rest too. Even the gods needed sleep. Shrines were swept clean, lamps snuffed out, incense left to smolder until only smoke remained. The caretakers bowed their heads and exited in silence. A holy hush took over, stretching into the sky. And if you were walking the streets of Rome during this time, you'd notice it. The voices of the city had changed. No longer the shouting of fishmongers or the pounding of hammers, just the scrape of a sandal, the flick of a torch. Even the city guards posted on their watch spoke in low tones. It was as though all of Rome agreed. This time belongs to rest. But the experience of sleep was not only dictated by silence, it was shaped by the architecture. Roman homes were not noisy boxes of echo and steel. They were heavy with plaster and stone, designed to muffle, to cool, to cradle the night. Windows were small, doors were thick, courtyards pulled in breeze without chaos. And deep inside, away from the outer walls, was the cubiculum, the bedroom, modest, dark, meant for nothing but sleep and privacy. You might imagine one now. A small room lit only by moonlight spilling through a wooden lattice, a bed raised slightly from the ground, a woven blanket, a low shelf with a lamp, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, a sprig of rosemary left from supper. You've placed your sandals just so. You've drawn the curtain, and now you lie down, not as a duty, not as a collapse, but as a return to self, to stillness, to everything inside you that only speaks when the world has quieted. And as you lie there, your mind wanders, not with anxiety, but with ease. You think of someone you love, a walk you took at sunset, the scent of warm bread, the weight of the sky overhead. Your body softens, your breath deepens. You are not fighting sleep, you are not waiting for it. You are meeting it, just as the Romans did. Every single night, because sleep to them was not something that worked or failed. It was part of being alive. You didn't need to master it. You needed only to greet it with care. And if it didn't come quickly, that was all right. You simply rested. Rest was enough. The act of lying down, of closing your eyes, of stepping out of the day, that in itself was a kind of healing. So now, Let the quiet deepen. Let the night do its work. Let yourself float gently into the dark without fear. You are safe. You are warm. You are resting in a tradition that has stretched across thousands of years, unchanged in its essence. The stars may be different, the buildings may have crumbled, but this peace is eternal. As we drift deeper into this exploration of ancient sleep, it's worth pausing to remember something vital, something that made Roman sleep so potent, so restorative. It wasn't just the quiet or the architecture or the rituals, it was the intention. The way they treated night not as an inconvenience between days, but as a sacred half of life. They didn't merely close their eyes at the end of a long day. They entered the night as if entering a temple. And inside that temple was space, not just physical space, but mental, emotional space. Space to slow, to forget, to remember, to feel. Roman life may have been filled with labor and politics and uncertainty, but night was the reprieve, the reset, and sleep was how they participated in that reprieve, willingly, without guilt, without shame, without trying to optimize or measure it. Even in cities, where chaos brewed by day, the night still belonged to sleep. Gladiators who trained their bodies to the edge of breaking collapsed onto straw pallets and slept without dreaming. Scholars who read scrolls by lamplight closed their eyes with a final line in their minds, letting it echo as they fell. Shopkeepers, their hands red with dye and salt and ash, curled under wool blankets, and let their breath return to its natural rhythm. No one escaped the need for sleep. No one was above it, and no one was excluded from its rituals either. Rich or poor, citizen or slave, Roman or foreigner, everyone had their own way of inviting sleep. A bowl of soup, a walk in the courtyard, a prayer, a song. Some placed little charms beneath their beds, amulets against bad dreams. Others wrote notes to their household gods, not long ones, just a few words, folded under a cup or tucked into a niche. Small acts of closure, gentle punctuation to the end of a sentence called the day. Think of that. How different it feels to close a day instead of simply surviving it, to acknowledge its end. To say aloud or silently, "That's enough now," it's a powerful thing. The Romans understood that sleep didn't just come from exhaustion, it came from permission, from grace, from ritual, a routine that honored not just the body but the person, all they had done, all they had felt. And that's something we can borrow. Tonight, even as the modern world hums and blinks around us, you can close your own day the Roman way. Let the worries go, like scrolls gently rolled and tied. Let the questions wait. Let the tasks remain undone. There will be more time. There always is. But this time, this moment, is for letting go, for wrapping yourself in stillness, for meeting the darkness not as something to conquer, but to join. Let's return again to the Roman countryside. You're in a villa perched on a hill, vines stretching in every direction. The lamps have been dimmed. The kitchen is silent. Only the breeze rustling the fig trees speaks now. You walk to your room barefoot, floor cool beneath your soles. You pass the quiet outlines of urns and low tables. The walls glow faintly in the moonlight. You draw the curtain, lie down on your cot, and let the night settle over you like a second skin. Your limbs are warm, heavy, and content. You don't ask if you'll sleep. You know you will, because you've created space for it, because your mind is quiet, because the world, this Roman world you've conjured, holds you like it has held generations before. You are not falling. You are being carried by tradition, by time, by breath. Outside, the stars watch but do not speak. They've seen centuries of sleepers close their eyes and release their days. You are no different. You are part of that ancient rhythm, not just a visitor in the past, but a participant, a dreamer, a sleeper. a soul at rest. And as you drift now, deeper and deeper, know this. You are safe here in your own quiet cubiculum, in your own sacred night. Sleep is not waiting to take you. It is already here. There's a softness to Roman sleep that transcends history, architecture, or even routine. It lives in the way they moved through the evening, with gentleness, with slowness, with a kind of quiet reverence for the body and its needs. And perhaps the greatest lesson we can draw from them isn't about what their beds looked like or how they lit their rooms, but how they listened to themselves, to each other, to the rhythm of the world. In many Roman households, sleep began not with silence, but with soft conversation. A family gathered in the courtyard, reclining on cushions. Someone sipped watered wine, another plucked at a lyre. No agenda, no tomorrow list. Just voices in the dark, rising and falling like waves on the Tiber. Some spoke about dreams they'd had. Others recounted folk tales or memories from years past. Children dozed mid-story, their heads slipping into laps or onto folded cloaks. There was no pressure to finish. Sleep, when it came, was part of the conversation. Even in solitude, this gentleness prevailed. Imagine a Roman widow, living alone but not lonely, preparing her bed as she's done every night for decades. She lights a lamp. She sits in prayer. She speaks the names of the ones she's lost. Not with sorrow, but gratitude. She arranges her room just so. She opens the shutter slightly, so the breeze can pass through. She pulls the wool blanket over her legs and smiles at the quiet. Her sleep is a reunion. Roman poets captured this spirit often. They wrote not just of war and glory, but of rest and surrender. Virgil described sleep as sweet forgetfulness, a balm against the worries of men. Ovid, always playful, spoke of dream gods who painted stories on the minds of sleepers. Even Seneca, the Stoic, acknowledged the beauty of a night well spent, not in thinking or doing, but in simply being still. And stillness, of course, is the heart of sleep, the kind of stillness that doesn't demand effort, that doesn't ask for goals, just presence. In the Roman night, you weren't chasing dreams. You were allowing them, letting them rise from the soil of your day like mist over a field. You didn't force rest. You invited it. You made space for it, like leaving a place at the table for a beloved guest. The architecture of Roman homes supported this. Thick walls blocked the heat. Courtyards brought in wind and shade. Sleeping quarters were placed strategically cool in summer, warmer in winter, close enough for safety, but private enough for calm. Even the beds, simple as they were, invited the body to settle. No sharp edges, no clutter, just a frame, a cushion, a blanket, and space. And sometimes, that's all we need. The body, after all, knows how to rest. It doesn't need coaching, it needs permission. The Romans understood that. They didn't overthink sleep. They honored it, trusted it. Their bodies were used to movement, long walks, manual labor, riding, bathing, carrying water, grinding grain. And at the end of it all, their muscles spoke a language older than Latin, fatigue. And sleep responded with a single word, yes. And in that yes, dreams unfurled. Some were prophetic, some were nonsense, some were echoes of memory, but all were accepted. You didn't wake in a panic, trying to decipher a symbol. You woke slowly, sat with your dream like a friend. And if you forgot it, that was fine. The sleep still did its work. The soul still wandered. The body still healed. No dream was wasted. No night was empty. Even in war, the Romans made space for rest, between battles, along the march, in quiet valleys and mountain passes. Soldiers would lie on cloaks beside campfires, their helmets resting beside them. One eye on the stars, one ear listening to the snores of a comrade nearby. They knew they might rise to horns and orders, but for now sleep was theirs, and even surrounded by danger, it held them. And now, here you are, safe, still, wrapped in quiet, a witness to their world, and a part of its rhythm. You're not reenacting anything, you're participating, just as they did, with breath, with silence, with surrender. And with each exhale, you are stepping further into the oldest ritual we know, closing the eyes, letting go, falling into the arms of night. Beneath the stars that once watched over Caesar and Cicero, sleep was not a luxury. It was not earned by productivity or purchased with comfort. It was an inheritance, a nightly return to something eternal. When the Romans laid down their heads, whether on silk in a villa or straw in a roadside stable, they were participating in a ritual that made them for a few precious hours equals. All Roman citizens, freedmen and slaves alike, everyone needed rest, and the night offered it freely. The humblest Roman, rising with the dawn to sell figs or bake bread, could close their eyes with the same sense of surrender as a noble reclining on a marble couch. Because the world grew quiet for everyone, the gods did not reserve dreams only for the powerful. Even a street sweeper might wake with a vision, and in that moment be more closely touched by divinity than a senator in his robes. Let us walk again, this time through a Roman tenement, an insula tall and creaking, layered with lives stacked one atop the other. It is late. On the lowest floor, a woman curls beside her child. On the floor above, a cobbler snores in the half-dark, the smell of glue and leather still clinging to the walls. Higher still, someone shifts in their sleep, muttering a dream aloud. Above them, the roof dwellers, poor but under open sky, lie in rows like seeds scattered by the wind, faces turned to the stars. And somehow, in all this, there is calm. You might think the closeness would make peace impossible, but the opposite is true. Proximity brings quiet in its own way, a shared understanding, a collective hush. You do not shout into the ear of someone dreaming. You let the breath of others remind you that you too can let go. In Roman writings, sleep is often described not just as necessary, but as beautiful. To lie as still as the forest, wrote one poet, to be as weightless as the mist. Another wrote of dreams coming like a procession of masks across the dark. They were not afraid of imagination. They allowed it to lead them gently, rather than wrestle it into submission. It was an art form, this nightly descent into the subconscious. And they didn't need reasons. They didn't justify their sleep with productivity. They didn't call it self-care or optimization. They simply slept because that's what the body does when night falls. That's what a soul needs after a day among others. There was no guilt in rest, no shame in stillness. Sleep was not an interruption of life. It was part of it. The sounds of the Roman night formed a tapestry textured and alive, a dog barking far off in the fields, water trickling from a courtyard fountain, the rhythmic knock of shutters in the breeze. If you were lucky, the low, steady breathing of a partner nearby. No hum of neon lights, no distant sirens, just the natural chorus of a world gone still. And into that stillness, sleep came not as a thief, but as a guest. It's easy to think of the ancient world as brutal, unkind, and in many ways it was. But even then, people slept. And that is perhaps the most human thing of all, that someone could walk miles under the blazing sun, sell fish at the port, wash dust from their feet, and then curl into themselves under a simple cloth and drift into the same dreams that have visited us all. So breathe in softly, let that cloth wrap around your shoulders. Imagine the breeze slipping between stone and curtain, the flicker of your oil lamp dancing on the wall. There is no time here, no deadline, no worry, just the quiet return to what you've always known, that sleep will come. It always has. It always will. And if for a moment you wake in the middle of the night, don't fear it. The Romans didn't. They believed such wakings were natural. A time to listen, to shift, to greet the night again, before returning to the depths. You can follow their lead, breathe, turn, settle, and let yourself be carried back on that old Roman tide into the dark. Let us wander now into the heart of a Roman domus, where silence has spread its cloak across every corridor, where torches have long since flickered out, and where dreams slip easily through the night like wind through tall cypress trees. Even in the finest villas, with polished mosaics and painted walls, sleep was not showy. It was intimate, soft, a moment away from marble and wealth, down into the shared stillness that bound all Romans together. Picture a bedroom, modest but elegant. The walls are painted with gentle reds and faded golds. A fresco of a nymph reclines above the doorway, her arms stretched in a lazy pose, as if she too is caught between waking and dreaming. On the floor, a woven mat cushions your bare feet as you move to lie down. The bed creaks softly beneath you. You exhale, and in that breath, centuries dissolve. The bed itself, known as a lectus cubicularis, is simple: wood, rope, maybe some bronze fixtures. A stuffed mattress rests atop it, filled with wool or straw covered in linen that smells faintly of lavender. No springs, no memory foam, just the body, the earth, and a line of rest between them. And when you lie back, you do not brace for sleep. You welcome it, like an old companion walking through the door with a smile. And perhaps there is someone beside you, a partner, a friend, a child tucked at your side. Roman nights were not always solitary. Sleep was a shared experience. You could feel the breath of another beside you, hear the small shifting of limbs in linen, and let that rhythm lull you further into peace. Some would hum a low tune, an old lullaby passed down, its words long forgotten, but its cadence still familiar. Sleep came like a tide, pulling gently. In wealthier homes, slaves or servants moved silently through the night, checking coals, securing shutters, placing fresh water near the bed. But even they, often the last to lie down, found a moment of stillness. In tiny back rooms, or on woven mats beside the kitchen hearth, they curled up, warm and spent, trusting that this hour at least belonged to them. And the city, meanwhile, breathed around them. Rome at night was not lifeless. It moved in whispers, a patrol passing softly in sandals, a neighbor whispering a last word, the occasional echo of laughter from a tavern where sleep had not yet found its way. But these were not intrusions. They were part of the city's lullaby, a reminder that even when others stayed awake, you could still rest. Romans didn't try to control sleep. They didn't micromanage it. They didn't track it with devices or judge it by minutes. They lived with it. If they awoke in the night, they might light a lamp, sip wine, scribble a thought on a wax tablet. And then, when the body called again, they returned to bed without frustration, without shame. Just as naturally as falling into step with a friend, there were even beliefs about sleep's ability to cleanse the soul, that in dreams, you could unburden yourself, that guilt could dissolve, sorrows soften, clarity arrive. People fasted before sleep, prayed for good dreams, left offerings to Somnus and Morpheus, not to demand peace, but to invite it. There was grace in the asking, in the stillness, in letting sleep take what the day could not carry. So close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Let the softness in. Let your body grow heavy, not with exhaustion, but with welcome. The Roman night is yours too. The walls may have crumbled, the language may have shifted, but the breath, the rhythm, the surrender, Those have not changed. They are waiting for you now, in this moment, as they always have. As we journey further into the Roman night, the deeper mysteries of sleep begin to reveal themselves, not only as a physical need or a cultural habit, but as something almost spiritual. In ancient Rome, the sleeping world was layered, the surface of rest, the ocean of dreams, and the hidden realm where gods whispered, ancestors watched, and the soul, lightened from its burdens, drifted freely. It was more than shutting the eyes. It was an entryway. To the Romans, sleep was a form of sacred vulnerability. You allowed yourself to be unguarded. You released control. Even the mightiest general, the richest landowner, the cleverest senator, all had to surrender each night. The state of sleep, then, was one of equality. And because it mirrored death in its stillness, it brought with it a kind of humility. To sleep well was to accept one's place in the order of things. Think now of the temples dedicated to healing, particularly those devoted to Asclepius, god of medicine. In these sacred sites, people traveled great distances to participate in incubatio, or dream healing. They would sleep inside the temple, believing that Asclepius would visit them in dreams to diagnose or even cure illness, and often they did emerge changed. Whether by divine intervention or the sheer power of belief, something in that sacred sleep restored them. The process wasn't hurried. Pilgrims fasted beforehand, purified themselves, entered the sanctuary in silence. They lay on stone benches or animal skins, inhaled incense, and surrendered not to doctors, but to dreams. When they awoke, priests or dream interpreters would help decode what had been seen, and those dreams, written on tablets and offerings, became public testimony, visible proof that the night and the gods within it were real and generous. And even outside the temples, Romans consulted dream books, libri de somnis, collections of visions and their meanings. A snake in a dream? A warning? A boat without sails? Unrest? Flying above the forum? A sign of favor? These interpretations weren't rigid. They were part of the conversation between self and universe, part of the mystery. You didn't need a clear answer. You needed only to listen. But of course, not every Roman night was tranquil. In times of war, rebellion, or plague, sleep could be elusive. Fear stalked the streets. Still, the people didn't abandon rest. They adapted, shifted their sleeping places, slept in shifts, prayed more fervently, whispered lullabies more softly. They trusted that even when the world was unstable, sleep could find them, that even in broken times, the night remained a healer. And for those whose hearts were broken, who had lost someone, failed in battle, been exiled, sleep was a form of mercy. He sleeps now, they would say of the dead, not gone, just sleeping. The tombs of loved ones were often adorned with inscriptions wishing peaceful rest, a recognition that in death we return to the deepest kind of Roman sleep, undisturbed, eternal, bathed in the kindness of night. Even in art, sleep was celebrated. Statues of reclining figures with serene expressions, frescoes of Somnus with wings on his temples, gently cradling the heads of mortals. Sleep was painted not as darkness or escape, but as embrace, a figure held in loving silence, a reminder that surrender need not be frightening, it could be beautiful. And so here you are, deep in this embrace yourself. Whether your day was easy or difficult, loud or quiet, none of that matters now. What matters is this moment, this breath, this night that holds you just as it once held the hearts and dreams of Rome. Sleep isn't something you must achieve. It's something that arrives when you're ready to be seen, to be still, to be safe. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. Let the images fall away. Let the world dim. You are not alone. You are never alone in the night. The Roman world sleeps with you. a gentle murmur across centuries. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The hush of 1,000 lives at peace. A civilization asleep, and within it, you. As the hush of the Roman night deepens, you begin to sense just how universal this surrender truly was. In every direction, across provinces and borders, in marble towns and earthen villages, sleep blanketed the empire like a great unseen veil, and beneath it, countless lives exhaled in harmony, some under tiles, others beneath thatch, some in woven hammocks on merchant ships adrift in Mediterranean bays, others nestled beside stone hearths in distant Gallic provinces, but all carried the same quiet longing to rest and to be restored. You might picture a Roman family traveling by cart on the Via Appia, having pulled to the side of the road as twilight melted into night. They light a small fire, they eat figs and bread, and then, without ceremony, they arrange their cloaks and curl beneath the open sky. No mattress, no roof, just starlight, the scent of pine, and the distant hoot of an owl echoing from some hilltop ruin. The father wraps his arms around his youngest child. The mother hums a few notes of an old tune, and soon sleep finds them, unafraid. Roman children, in particular, were gently guided toward good sleep. There were no glowing screens to distract, no unnatural light to chase the night away. Instead, there were stories, myths passed down, recited not for excitement but for rhythm. The tale of how Somnus, the god of sleep, lived in a cave of shadows. How his gates, one made of ivory, one of horn, let dreams pass into the world of the living. The voice telling these tales often slowed as it spoke, the cadence settling into the stillness. Children learned to associate sleep, not with separation, but with magic. In rural communities, farmers would end their day by the cycles of the sun. There were no clocks to keep time, only instinct. The work began with light and ended with dusk. By nightfall, the body was ready. The home was darkened. The beds were simple wooden frames, or sometimes just piled straw. Whole families might sleep in a single room, limbs entangled, not from poverty but closeness. To sleep in a group was not disorder. It was comfort. It was protection. It was love. And when sleep came, it brought its quiet gifts. A clear mind, a soft body, a soul that wandered gently through dreams, sometimes meaningless, sometimes profound. No one scolded a child for dreaming too vividly. No one mocked a soldier for seeing omens in his sleep. These visions were part of being alive, being open, and even when they were strange or unsettling, they were accepted with curiosity, not fear. In cities, the rhythms of sleep adjusted to the buzz of Roman urban life. Bakers might rise before dawn to prepare bread for the day's market. Officials kept schedules punctuated by daylight, but still, no matter how demanding the day, the night was honored. The flicker of torchlight, the scent of damp stone after an evening rain, the gentle hush that fell across the alleys of even the busiest quarters, all of it coaxed the citizens home to their beds, to their rest. Sleep in Roman times was not something to resist or delay. It wasn't pushed off by schedules or consumed by worry. It was met with open arms. Even those dealing with illness or grief allowed sleep to soften their wounds. If someone was anxious or disturbed, they were not told to sleep it off with harshness. Instead, they were offered warmth, quiet, and understanding, a slower rhythm, a hand on the back, the knowledge that no pain was permanent, and that sleep, if allowed, would bring relief. And for lovers, sleep was a kind of sacred ending. After embraces and whispers, after limbs tangled beneath linen sheets, the stillness afterward was often as meaningful as the connection itself. To fall asleep beside someone was not just physical, it was a declaration of safety, of shared rhythm. The slow breathing of another became a kind of lullaby, and the warmth between bodies lingered as the night took over. Even in their dreams, the Romans were not alone. Ancestors appeared, lost friends, images of the gods, whole lives unfolded behind the eyes. When they awoke, they often remembered not just the dreams but the feeling of being held, not by a person, but by the night itself. Sleep, in the Roman mind, was not emptiness. It was fullness, a space that gave rather than took. So let this night give to you now. Let your breath match the rhythm of a world long gone, yet still close. Let your body remember what it's always known, that sleep is your birthright, that silence is not something to fear, that rest is not indulgence, it is restoration. And in this moment, in this quiet, you are as Roman as any soul who once lay under a tiled roof, a darkened sky, a whispering tree. As the Roman world slumbers deeper, even the dreams themselves take on a rhythm older than memory. In the minds of those sleeping across the empire, from the wind-swept provinces of Britannia to the sun-soaked streets of Alexandria, images rise like vapor. Olive groves swaying in moonlight, quiet temples glowing with sacred oil, distant laughter echoing from childhood games now long past. Sleep was not escape, it was remembering. To drift into sleep in ancient Rome meant more than letting go of the day. It meant reconnecting with something quieter, deeper, a personal myth, a private sanctuary. Many Romans described dreams as places, not just moments. They visited gardens they'd never seen. They spoke with strangers who somehow felt familiar. And in the morning, when asked, they would say, "I returned to the place of my dreams." Not "I had a dream, but I went there," as if the dream were always waiting. Some dreams were believed to carry divine meaning, but others were simply sweet. A young woman dreaming of her lover's return from campaign, a boy dreaming of racing chariots through sunlit fields, a widow dreaming of her husband's voice. These were not messages to be decoded. They were comforts, visitors from memory, gentle companions in the dark. And if nightmares came, and they did, they weren't treated as faults of the dreamer. They were omens, warnings, sometimes signs of imbalance in the soul or household. Remedies were gentle, a prayer to the gods of sleep, a cleansing of the sleeping space, a change in routine. Bad dreams weren't feared. They were honored, listened to, addressed with kindness. The gods of sleep themselves, Somnus and his son Morpheus, were not fierce or vengeful. They were caretakers of the night. Somnus was often shown reclining in his cave of shadows, wrapped in silence, surrounded by poppies and dreams. Morpheus, the shaper of visions, moved with grace between realms, placing dreams like gifts in the minds of sleepers. To call upon them was not a demand, it was an invitation, and they answered with dreams soft as silk. In Roman gardens, poppies were grown not just for beauty, but for their connection to rest. Their petals symbolized the softness of sleep, their milky sap used in small amounts to soothe pain or ease sleeplessness. It was not unusual for a sick child to be given a honeyed drink steeped with herbs and poppy, then tucked into bed with a whispered blessing, "Let Somnus carry you gently." And often he did. The art of sleeping well was considered a sign of wisdom, not sloth, not weakness, but balance. Philosophers praised those who could rest their minds. Writers extolled the stillness of night as the cradle of clarity, and soldiers, hardened by war, understood that a few hours of good sleep could be more valuable than any weapon. It was said that a rested man could see the truth of things more clearly, both in dreams and in waking. And for those who couldn't sleep, the remedies were holistic: a warm bath, a change of bedding, soft readings from a scroll, a visit to the temple, a stone placed under the pillow with a prayer etched on its surface. Every effort was gentle. The idea wasn't to conquer sleeplessness, but to soothe it, to lull it away like a crying infant, rocked into silence by presence and care. As the hours wore on, the Roman night grew heavier, thicker with dreams. Homes that bustled with voices, hours earlier became vast vessels of breath. You could walk a mile through the city and hear nothing but the wind. The moon glowed silver on tiled rooftops. The aqueducts hummed quietly, water flowing like a heartbeat beneath sleeping feet. Even the animals slept. Oxen and goats curled into hay, cats stretching under clay ovens, dogs twitching in puppy dreams. And somewhere, nestled into that vast hush, you too are resting, part of a lineage of sleepers stretching back across millennia. You're not pretending to be Roman. You are Roman, in spirit, in the way you breathe into the dark, the way you let go, the way you accept that this too is life. Not the doing, not the proving, but the resting, the letting be. Let us now walk one last slow lap through the sleeping Roman world, from the edges of the empire to its heart, from the fields to the palaces, from the most humble quarters to the quietest chambers of the gods. The night, in its fullness, has folded itself around every stone, every person, every breath. And in this deep hour, closer to dream than to waking, we begin to feel what the Romans may have understood all along, that sleep is the truest act of trust. To sleep is to surrender the self, and in surrender, to be held, whether by a partner's arms, by the gentle creak of an old cot, or by the presence of gods unseen. The Romans, ever practical in the daylight, became poets of the night, and the poetry was in how they let go, how they closed their days without force, without grasping. They trusted that rest would return, as the sun always did. Imagine now a quiet villa along the coast of Campania. The sea has gone black. The waves murmur softly against the cliffs below. Inside, the mosaic floors are cool, and the air smells of salt and jasmine. The household sleeps. The master of the home lies with one arm over his chest, his thoughts gone to the wind. A servant girl rests nearby, wrapped in a faded cloak. Even the animals have stilled. There's nothing more to do. The day is gone, and what remains is peace. Far inland, in a soldier's tent pitched along the Rhine, another kind of sleep takes hold. It is colder here. The stars are sharp and bright. The tent is lined with furs. A soldier's boots are tucked beneath his cot, his sword nearby. He breathes deeply. Slowly, his shoulders, tight all day, have finally softened. The rhythm of his breath is matched by dozens of others in nearby tents. A small army of sleepers, all bound together by fatigue and routine, and the strange comfort of brotherhood in silence. In the narrow alleys of a Roman insula, sleep comes not in luxury, but in closeness. Families lie curled together on mats. A mother hums a lullaby long after her child has fallen asleep, not for him but for herself. A man dreams of Sicily, though he has never been. Someone stirs, scratches, rolls over, but no one rises. The dark belongs to sleep, and it's respected. The temples, too, have gone still. The great columns cast long shadows under moonlight. Torches flicker in alcoves. Even the priests sleep now, their sandals by the door, their robes folded neatly. The gods do not need tending at this hour. Or perhaps, in their quiet divinity, they are the ones tending us, watching over 1,000 sleepers, listening to the night breathe. A few lanterns still glow faintly in the windows of insomniacs, writers perhaps, or those kept awake by the pull of a distant thought. They scratch notes onto parchment, sip from clay cups. Eventually even they will tire. The light will dim, the body will insist, and sleep, patient and forgiving, will take them too. This sleep is not measured in minutes, or judged by dreams. It is not anxious. It is not competitive. It is simply received, like a tide returning to the shore, like nightfall across the Palatine Hill, like a breeze slipping under a linen curtain and brushing the skin without warning. The Romans knew sleep is not something you earn, it's something you remember how to do. And so now, as we follow them into the final curve of the night, your own sleep deepens, not because you forced it, but because you let it. The thoughts that tried to linger have faded like footsteps down a corridor. The day has shut its doors, and what remains is the hush of Rome, ancient, tender, and eternal. Close your eyes if they are still open. Let the weight of your body melt into whatever you rest upon. You are not drifting away. You are arriving back into the oldest rhythm of all: breath, stillness, sleep. And so, dear listener, we find ourselves at the end, not just of a night or a story, but of a gentle journey that has wound through marble streets and shadowed courtyards, past sleeping soldiers and dreaming scholars, down the corridors of a world that once was, but whose rhythms still hum in us, quietly, faithfully. You have walked beside Romans at rest. You have breathed in their night. And now you have become part of it. Let the last candle gutter. Let the final torch fade. Let even memory go dim. There is nothing more to recall. No more names. No more gods. No more footsteps through the forum. It is all behind you now. You are deeper than history. You are deeper than dreams. You are where the Romans themselves arrived, each night without resistance, with trust and breath, and a kind of reverence for the simple miracle of rest. In the domus, the embers in the hearth glow softly beneath a veil of ash. A child turns over in sleep. Outside, the garden is silver in moonlight. A terracotta statue of Somnus rests in the shadows, eyelids half lowered, lips in an eternal hush. Nothing stirs. Even the trees have paused. Even the air holds still, as if not to disturb you. And in the countryside, where the olive groves stretch like fingers into the night, farmers lie cradled in the scent of earth and grass. Their work is done. Their bones are heavy. And yet their sleep is light. So light, it floats above the fields like mist. They do not dream of politics or war or profit. They dream of rivers, of bread, of walking barefoot through warm soil. The things that last. You are not so different. In this moment, there is no separation between you and them. No screen, no timeline, no centuries. Only the breath you take now. Only the pulse beneath your fingertips. Only the silence that waits, softly, patiently, to guide you further inward. The Romans believed in the sacredness of thresholds, the moment between one thing and the next. And sleep was one of the greatest thresholds of all. To cross it was to be humbled, renewed. They entered it willingly, as you do now, with nothing left to do, with nothing more to say. If your eyes are still open, let them close. If your thoughts still wander, let them settle. You are safe here. You are held here. You are part of something older than history and deeper than words. The same quiet that cradled Rome cradles you now. And when morning comes soft and slow, you will rise not with urgency, but with ease. You will carry a piece of this stillness with you, a whisper of Roman night folded into your breath. And perhaps when the world grows loud again, you'll remember that somewhere inside you, the hush still waits, ready to return, whenever you need. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this has brought you comfort, rest, or even just a sense of calm curiosity, I'd be honored if you'd let me know. Share where you listen from, what time it is for you. Subscribe if you haven't already, and join me again when you're ready to drift, not into the past, but through it, one peaceful night at a time. Until then, rest well, and sleep like a Roman.